If you want more variety in your game and you like the sound of the event deck and the tokens, it's a must buy. Hello everyone and welcome to another Beyond the Base Game review, and this is for the Branch and Claw expansion specifically for Spirit Island. You may have seen a certain review video I did recently for Spirit Island where I was not too hyped up about the game really. I love it. Oh, wait, I'm still recording. Okay, maybe just a teensy little bit hyped about it. Well, like I say, can you blame me? It's an awesome game. But when I bought this game originally, I decided that I wanted to jump straight into Branch and Claw, although I did play some games without it to begin with while I was learning it, because from my multiplayer experiences before I bought the game, they had Branch and Claw included, and I thought, you know what, there's a lot of stuff in Branch and Claw that I actually would like to have in my games on a permanent basis. Now, I have not yet tried Jagged Earth. I have seen the spirits that are in Jagged Earth, and I have experienced the game with Jagged Earth because I've played a couple of multiplayer games with friends who know the game better than I do, and so we've included Jagged Earth stuff in there. So I am familiar with Jagged Earth. But I've not yet got a copy of it. I believe it's on its way to me at some point soon, so we'll cross that bridge in the future. But for now, this is my copy, Branch and Claw. So, what do you get in this game? Quite a bit, it has to be said. I mean, for a box that's not the biggest thing in the world, you actually do get quite a good amount of variety here. Now, as you can see, I've got the Spirit Island box already, and I also have Spirit Island set up with an insert from Folded Space. Trust me, this insert is fantastic. Check out my video on my Folded Space insert reviews recently. It holds Spirit Island and Branch and Claw all together. If you've got Jagged Earth, you'll need to get another insert and put it in the Jagged Earth box. But, I'll be happily doing that when it comes out. This is a brilliant insert. It makes setup a breeze. So, what do you get in here? For the most part, mainly more variety. More of the good stuff, which is great. I mean, this game already has a lot of variety in the base box. That's one great thing about it. But you certainly have got a little bit extra here. So you have got more Blighted Healthy Island cards, the ones that dictate what special role happens when your island gets blighted all of a sudden. You've got more player aid cards. You've got a few more fear cards. So the fear deck now has a bit more variety in it. You've got a few more minor powers. You've got some more major powers. And of course, more powers is always great because now you don't always see like your chosen amazing ones every time you go through the deck. On top of that, we've even got more scenarios that you can do. So you've got 4 scenarios here. Powers Long Forgotten, which is kind of good if you've got spirits who mess around with Dahan quite a bit. Rituals of the Destroying Flame. So basically, if you carry a lot of... It's harder for those who like to direct damage things. They're kind of like, you know what, we can take a little bit of your hits. Second Wave, I've not actually played this one. This one is easier for those who delay the prior game's victory to stack the board. And you've got Ward the Shores, which is very good if you're a coastline spirit. So, I mean, it's a very fun one to play if you're River Surges in Sunlight, for example. But you already had about 4 of these in the base set, now you got 8. And that's like on top of everything else. And did I mention another adversary as well? Kingdom of France, the Plantation Colony. Now I have actually played against France on basic, I think level 1 or level 2 difficulty, and it's quite cool, but you've just got to be careful that you don't run out of towns, because that's another loss condition, and this one has a habit of adding towns relatively easily if you can help it. But it's another adversary, so you already had, I think from the base box, Prussia, England, and Sweden. Now you've got France. So what have you got now? 8 scenarios, 4 adversaries. The amount of variety in terms of what you can do for setting up your game is ridiculous. That is a great thing. I can cherry pick whatever I like and I will get a different type of game each time. So once we've got past all the extra variety stuff, which is still fantastic, I mean that's more than enough reason to get this expansion anyway, what's actually brand new? Well, the main thing that adds, twofold actually. Firstly, you've got a selection of these really nice cool tokens. And, nice little cover tokens, and they're pretty good actually. I like the quality of these in terms of like the imagery and the colour contrast that they use. But basically, these are kind of status effects that can happen on the various lands. So we have got the yellow, I'm not going to be able to show them on the camera here, but you'll be able to see pictures. You've got the yellow disease markers. So when you start the game, you now have a disease marker and a beast marker on the board to begin with. Disease stops them building. for the round. It's like a temporary marker. All of these are, for the most part, temporary markers. So if they decide to build in a particular area, remove the disease token and that's it. Great. But there is a downside to the disease, because occasionally the disease likes to rear its ugly head and kill off some of your Dahan, so you gotta be a little bit careful about having the natives where there's disease. Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? Beast tokens, so basically the big feral kitties and everything like that of the world, and reptiles and anything else that wants to eat people. These have a habit of sticking around for a bit, but occasionally, and we'll get onto why later, they tend to eat lone invaders. Occasionally they can take out towns, but it's more about eating those lone explorers who go wandering off into the wilds, and it's kind of like, it's like, oh, what's that noise? And it's like, and drag them off into the hedge or something. It's like, I like using these are good fun. You've got strife tokens here, which are essentially like, they kind of hold off ravages. If you put a strife token on a particular piece, then it doesn't do its damage in the ravage phase, so it's really good to stop a ravage causing blight. But it's temporary, but you can stack them, and it's great to put these on things like cities and towns, which are going to do the most damage. So, you know, you might have a city and an explorer in one area, and if you strife the city, the explorer will only do 1 damage by themselves, and it stops it blighting. I don't see these as often in my games. It really does depend on what kind of spirit you're using or what cards come up, but it's a nice addition to certain cards when they do appear, and it's just nice when they come out. Even less common, unless you're playing a particular spirit, then you get the wild tokens, these green ones, which stop people exploring on the land. So that's essentially what these are. The beast tokens are a little bit more unique, but essentially the other 3 affect the invaders' actions. So disease affects build, wilds affects exploring, and strife affects ravage. So those 3 are kind of similar in how they operate, whereas the beast tokens are a little bit more permanent on the board and tend to do like the odd bit of killing every now and again. But I love these. These are something I would want in every game of Spirit Island, because it just adds extra cool effects that can take place. The new cards that you've got for powers utilize these to some extent, like adding more or doing stuff with them, and the bit I'll get onto in a minute utilizes these tokens quite heavily as well. And they're not a complex addition. I mean, you get a player aid card that tells you exactly how each one of them works, but it pretty much is self-explanatory when you read the card. I don't see why you wouldn't want to include these in every game once you've got Branch and Claw. To use some of these tokens, you have what is possibly the controversial addition in Spirit Island, the event deck. Now, the event deck is one that not everybody is keen on, and I personally really enjoy the event deck. What it does is that it adds random events that turn up during a round, and they could be, say, a choice that you've got to make, like a 50-50 choice, almost like a story thing. It could be based on what stage of the game you're at, so the Invader deck stage, or it could be based on whether the island is healthy or blighted. So different effects will happen. These could be good or bad, depending. Sometimes it hinders you, sometimes it helps you. It really does depend. I mean, there is a randomness to it. And then it also has an effect which usually keys off stuff like the tokens. So you might have, for example, on each board, add a disease, ignore disease during the build phase. But then on the flip side, you might have choose a land with disease, and each land do 2 damage to invaders and Dahan. So it's like, yes, I know I butchered that name, but you know, so you've got to be aware of that. But then there's some that deal with strife, like invaders do not ravage in places with strife, and the beast tokens. Each beast token destroys 1 explorer, add 1 to a board without 1. So, you know, basically that effect keys off those tokens. So you do need to use the tokens in conjunction with this. You can't, this isn't a modular expansion. You need to use it all or nothing. And then there's usually some effect that keys off the Dahan. So, well, a nice easy one here. On each board, add a wild token to a land with Dahan. On each board, add a Dahan to an inland board with Dahan. So it tends to bolster up the natives, which is good because you tend to only have 6 in the base game, and that's it. It's nice that there's a few things here that could potentially add more, whether it's just to have a big army or to recover losses. Now, some people love this deck, and I personally love using this deck. I will play the game without it, it's fine, but people aren't as fan of the random element of this. I personally like it because as much as I enjoy the game without the event deck, I mean, I gave the game a 10 out of 10 without the event deck, I still love it. It is a very predictable game at that point. Not to say that like, oh, I know exactly how this is going to pan out, but because there's no random element to affect the round, once you know what the actions of the invaders are going to be, you know exactly how it's going to play out. This can throw a little bit of a spanner in the works in a good or bad way, but I like that extra variability, you know, that little bit of an unknown. Like, I've planned out my turn, this is what I'm going to do, let's see what happens now, and I like it when the game does that. It also adds a little bit of extra narrative in a sense, especially with my favourite events, which usually have you deciding between two outcomes. So, a strange madness among the beasts, they grow wilder and more savage. You may let them rampage unto death, or guide the madness. And so each one of them typically is a bit of a negative and one of them is more of a positive, but you've got to pay energy or discard cards in order to do it. But these can be some good game changers at times. You know, at the right time, if you're willing to go, it means I've got to get rid of some cards in my hand, I'm going to have to reclaim next turn and spend that energy, but that effect would stop that ravaging. I could really do with this right now, and I love these little choices that they throw in. So honestly, I like the events. But I totally understand if you're one of those players who doesn't. It really is a case that you just need to try it and see for yourself. But you do kind of need to use them with everything else in this expansion, really, because I don't think the tokens would get enough use without the event deck. So as much as I think you could play this expansion, without the event deck, I think you're losing out a little bit on it. So personally, I would use it in every game. And I know most of people I know with prefer the events as well, but there are a few diehard Spirit fans who prefer not. That is entirely fine. Now, you do have a board to store new stuff on, which is somewhat redundant once you got the insert. It's really kind of pointless, because all it basically does is stores the scenario card you're doing, it stores the adversary you're using, so you're not even doing both at the same time typically. Then you've got an event deck discard and then space to put the tokens. Again, entirely redundant once you got the inserts. So I don't even use this board anymore. I mean, I've got the tokens are all in this nice little box. I can put the adversary on the table. I don't really need a board for that sort of thing. Same with the event deck. I just put it nearby. Honestly, yeah, really don't need this board. So it's sadly a bit of wasted taking up space in the box, but everything stores in it, so what the hell. And finally, you got 2 new spirits. Yes, more spirits is always good. I mean, more of the good stuff is already great, but adding more spirits is definitely the main way you're going to entice me to an expansion. This is why I can't wait for Jagged Earth, all those spirits. And yes, I can play it on Tabletop Simulator and try them out, but I kind of want to own the physical copies. You know, that's what I want. I want these nice cool boards. Well, you've got Keeper of the Forbidden Wilds and Sharp Fangs behind the leaves, and I have played both. I've played every single spirit in this box now. That's how kind of addicted I'm getting to the game at this point. Now, in terms of which one I prefer, greatly Sharp Fangs behind the leaves. Now, this is not necessarily down to how powerful I think they are. I mean, I'm still a noob at this game, what do I know? But it's more a combination of how powerful I think they are and how much fun they are to play, both thematically and mechanically. Keeper of the Forbidden Wilds is cool in terms of power level, but it's a slow build-up. It's a bit like the Rock Biter one, as I'll call him now. Get your motor running. You know, it takes a while to get your presence on the board, and you kind of have to sort of build up before you can get to like that really juicy stuff on your presence track. But it's pretty good at getting a lot of energy. In fact, Keeper of the Forbidden Wilds is kind of one of those ones where it's like, ooh, I want to go major power route. Well, this guy's pretty good for it, because he already starts off with 2, and then quickly ends up on 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. You can get a lot of energy with this guy, although, side problem, you don't get a lot of energy from growth, and one of your growths requires you to actually spend energy to do it. In fact, both of them have got a unique system where you pick 2 growth options, and one of them costs energy. In this case, it costs 3 energy to do one of them, which is quite expensive. So even though you can gain a lot of energy, you got to be a little bit careful with it. But essentially what this guy is all about is the wild tokens, primarily. Very good with offense and defense, and a bit of control. Not particularly good at generating fear, though. But essentially, the innate powers all revolve around pushing lone explorers, adding wild tokens, or just doing straight-up damage. And what this person likes is, you know, most of the cards, is sticking the wild tokens on the board. So the ones that stop explorers from exploring, you know what I mean, invaders from exploring, this one's pretty good. Moderate complexity, I enjoy it. Not my favourite spirit from a gameplay perspective. You know, I like it. I like him fine and I will use him, and I had good times with him. Like, I won every game with the ones I've used, but I'm playing it on low difficulty, so what do you expect? But, you know, it's a decent like spirit all round. It's just not one of my first I'm going to pick for like, oh, I really want to play this particular spirit now. So still good, still pretty powerful, just not one of my favourites. But man, do I like this one. Sharp fangs behind the leaves. This big sort of black cat panther with like red stripes all over it. I mean, it's an awesome looking spirit. It reminds me of, and I made this mistake before, I kept calling it the Nothing from Neverending Story. This creature wasn't the Nothing. I think it was called Gmok. I think it was called Garmok or Jimok or something like that, or Gmok, but whatever. It was basically the big wolf from the Neverending Story. So it wasn't the Nothing, it was that wolf. But it reminds me of that character, who was like such a cool character in the actual movie, even though he goes out like a wuss in the very end, but still, he looks really menacing, doesn't he? But this one just thematically works for me. I love this idea that you use the beast tokens more, you try to add more onto the table so you can litter the place with all sorts of like, you know, like jaguars and cheetahs and stuff, you know, this is thematically, it's just tokens, but this is what I'm doing in my mind. But this one is all about gathering them up, moving them around, because they're not usually very mobile with the event deck. Here, they're very mobile, and you're trying to lead them into places so that they can eat up lone explorers and deal with the occasional town. Weaknesses is that it doesn't do well at dealing with lots of construction. So, you know, the cities can be a bit of a problem for this one, unless you get them all into one area. You've got to like really condense all the predator spirits to do it. But for the most part, I just love the way it feels. Thematically and mechanically, it's a good fun one to play, moderate complexity, pretty good offense and control, and very good at generating fear, which is one of my favourite things I like to do in this game, generate lots of fear. Just not great on the defense or utility uses. And certainly if the land gets blighted beyond belief, the effectiveness of this one goes down a bit. I'm also not a big fan of the Frenzied Assault innate power. It's a little bit hard to trigger, and removing the tokens, it doesn't do a huge amount of damage either, but the Ranging Hunt, the one that allows you to gather tokens, push them, and then do a bit of damage for each token, is like one you want to trigger as often as possible. It is so useful. It's a little bit hard to juggle your energy with this one because the energy track doesn't give you a lot, but it does give you the symbols, the threshold symbols, and you can play quite a few cards and reclaim up to 2 cards a round if you level up the bottom track. So this one is definitely one of those ones that's not so much about getting major powers, it's about getting a lot of good minor powers and spamming the hell out of them. You know, so it works well with that. But yeah, this is one of my favourites, if not my favourite spirit I like to play. That's everything for Branch and Claw. Quite a lot, you've got to admit, in there. I mean, there is a bucket load more cards, the event deck is cool, more scenarios, more adversaries, 2 more spirits. It's just a great addition to this game. Is it essential? No, as I said, I love the game without Branch and Claw already, but as I said, it was 10 out of 10, almost 9 out of 10 for the base set alone. I mean, it's not, as much as I love it as a 10 out of 10, it does, I did get a little bit like, I want a little bit more variability in my games, not necessarily be able to predict it from from day 1 to day 2. But yeah, definitely Branch and Claw is well worth it. I would say it's easily like a 9 out of 10 expansion for me. If you want more variety in your game and you like the sound of the event deck and the tokens, it's a must buy. Cannot wait to get Jagged Earth for this as well. So that's it for me on this Beyond the Base Game review. If you like what you see, consider subscribing, check out the Patreon page, and don't forget to look in the description for the 5% discount code on zatu.co.uk. If Spirit Island's on your radar, and eventually, I think it's out of stock at the moment, but when it comes back into stock, as it inevitably will, use the code, save yourself some pennies, and grab yourself one hell of a good game. Check out the review on Spirit Island as well to hear my thoughts on it in more detail. So, see you next time, take care, and remember, no matter which spirit you like to play, it's still only a game. Bye for now.